Yes, this is a great honor to have Carolyn Childs with her fruitful and insightful responses to all the questions, not only mine, but also the audiences. And also, I really appreciate the audiences to join actively to our Tourism Live Talk sessions, because your presence gives us a huge energy in order to keep asking questions from Carolyn. Yeah, we appreciate Ged, we appreciate Chris, we appreciate Mubina, we appreciate Ahmad, we appreciate all the audiences who are here, we appreciate Dara for joining our live talk, and we know that how much important your presence is to us, and this is a great pleasure to host you all here. Okay, let me invite Caroline, because I think that she's got her cup of tea and now she's ready to join back to our live talk and to continue the Q&A session with Caroline. Yeah, Caroline, how are you? Is everything all fine?
I'm good. Had a few sips of tea, but actually I've been sneaking a few in all the way through.
I've taken mine. I've taken mine here. Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah, that's all right.
This one's for all the cat lovers out there.
Great. And as you know, one of the most famous cats in the world is Persian cat.
Yes.
Yeah, but as you are invited before from me, so when you come here, maybe I will give you, I don't know if you like pets or not.
Yes, I own a cat, but she's not Persian. She's just an ordinary Australian moggy.
So rather than a Persian carpet, we should give you a Persian cat too.
Oh, no, I'll take a Persian carpet, because I think my cat would kill a Persian cat. she's very territorial.
So there will be a fight between the. Are you Australian? Yeah.
The cat is, yes.
Yeah, the cat. A very good fight between an Australian and Persian cat. But anyway, yes. Okay, that's great. Go on.
So Mohammed, I'm curious. I've been told this story about Persian carpets, that every Persian carpet has a small flaw in it because only God is perfect. Is that story true?
Of course it is true.
I actually use that as a metaphor for people to tell them, well, normally if I mess up, I always say that's my Persian carpet moment. But I also tell people that to remember that, because all of us have flaws in it. And it's okay to, occasionally we will make mistakes. We're always terrified of making mistakes in business, and we should try and avoid them. But the nature of being human is we will make mistakes, and so we all have our Persian carpet moments.
Very good. Have you ever touched that?
Have I what?
Have you ever touched Persian carpet?
Yes, but
yeah.
Only when no one's looking, because they're quite expensive.
Yeah, quite expensive. You know, we have 19 different kinds of Persian carpets. Then each one of them belongs to a very specific city with a different theme and different colors and different flowers. But whenever you come to Iran, I will take you into each single of those Persian carpet shops in order to give you details about each single of them. Okay?
Okay. And what I'll have to say on that, Mohammed, is I will need to bring my sister from the UK, because she is the shopper. I will want the culture and the story. She'll be the one who's getting the credit card out, because she is, we're only, and this is why I say demographics are often a bad measure. She's only a year and a bit younger than I am, but we're completely different personalities. And she we have a phrase that some of you may know, shop till you drop. She is a shop till you drop her. I've normally dropped a long time beforehand. So.
Great. So next time you will be a Persian carpet influencer when you come back to your country.
Yes.
And yeah, definitely. So let me go into my first question on the basis of the previous description that I gave to my audiences. What do we mean when we say influencers?
It would be helpful if we all agreed on that, wouldn't it, Mohammed?
Yeah, why not?
Well, I think for most people, as we were touching on just before we left, when you say influencers, they do think of, you know, the Kylie Jenners of the world. But I think the important thing, as I say, is when you're looking at an influencer for a business, is who is somebody who can be an influencer for my business? And that could be what we've seen is the rise. You know, we had the influencer trend grow. Suddenly people were giving thousands of dollars to people, or equally thousands of free things away, because you would have influencers turn up and say, I'll write a blog for you, or I'll post something on Instagram, but you give me something for free. And they suddenly didn't necessarily see a connection between that and what was happening. But I think that's because they weren't really deploying influencers strategically. They weren't thinking about, was that the right influencer for me? Or was it the right influencer in the wrong moment? I'm not sure how many of your listeners would ever have seen the famous Kylie Jenner Pepsi ads, where they used her as an influencer, and they used a message about talking about race, and it went spectacularly wrong. Right thinking, but she was the wrong person to be bringing that message in the wrong place. So I think, and also the wrong timing. It came out at the time of a campaign in the US called Black Lives Matter, which was looking at the fact that the incidence of black people dying in America is much higher than other groups when they encounter law enforcement. And it went spectacularly wrong, because there'd been this kind of, I think often we think influencers, we can often be quite use things like it's a very lazy approach if you don't do it properly. But if you use influencers very strategically, then they will deliver those returns for you. So who are, and I remember having this question in focus groups that I've done here in Australia, and we said, you know, who are your influencers? And actually the people who were the most influential were people who presented travel shows on television. And you started to see that, and you realize, well, you know, those were the influencers. So now there's a company here who kind of sells distressed inventory, and they have a former TV presenter called Natalie Grushinsky, because to her audience, she'd spent years building that relationship. Then, you know, TV companies thought, oh, travel shows aren't exciting anymore. But she had a huge loyal base out there of people who trusted her when she said, this is a destination you should go to. So similarly, travel journalists, you know, the visiting journalist program is still, or a visiting travel writers program is still an absolutely fantastic influencers tool. And I think it's actually going to become more of an influencers tool, because, you know, there was a kind of trend a couple of years ago away from distrusting, you know, experts. Experts were perceived to have let us down during the global financial crisis. So we turned away from experts. But I think what COVID-19 has reminded us is actually expertise is very important. So I think looking at those traditional audiences, their influence will come back up. On top of that, there are, you know, what you have to look at is there's a whole series of principles. And there's a couple of companies who work with influencers and specialize in influencer marketing. One particular called CleverTap. They actually have a list of the criteria of what you should look for in an influencer for you, and, you know, what are the things that you need to set out. Because again, if you don't set out clearly what your expectations are, and they don't tell you clearly what they will and won't do, it's bound to go wrong. So again, I think having a clear understanding of, you know, who that audience is influencing, how they work, what they're doing, what you're expecting to get out of it. If you do that, I still think influencers are going to be a trend. I have a trend that I call the end of shiny and the beginning of shining. And I think influencers sit in that space. And this is an idea of, you know, when something new comes out, we all love shiny new toys. In travel, we are absolutely always the latest shiny new thing we want to do, whether it's marketing, whether it's product or whatever. And people go off and do it and it doesn't work. So they go, they don't think it's because they executed it badly or they didn't have a proper strategic view. they think it's going to be because, it doesn't work. So at that point, most of the things that make it not work are now known. So other people pivot away from it. And then if you go in at that point, that's actually a really great point, because that's really when that form or that category of marketing starts to shine. A very good way to look at this, and something for everyone to try and search if they can, the US technology company Gartner has what it calls a hype of innovation curve. And they do one for marketing and marketing technologies and marketing approaches. Gartner is Gartner, if you're not familiar with it. And they talk about that excitement curve, and then they talk about something that they call, when the edge comes off, and then they talk about right down at the bottom, the trough of disillusionment. But then they talk about the plateau of enlightenment, where people start to realize there's actually something good. The time to get into doing something is at that point where it's just started to dip down the curve, where I was going, oh, that doesn't work. Go away and look at why that didn't work. Not everything will be. Some things will just be a bad idea. But go away and look at why it didn't work, and work out how to make it work. Because again, at peak influencer time, influencers were charging silly money. At the moment, as things soften, you might find it's a little bit more cost effective to get influencers. Like, now's a great time to go out and negotiate for paid advertising. If you can find any money to do paid advertising, particularly TV advertising, if you're looking to inspire people, you probably get the best rates that you'll ever get in your lifetime right now, and probably for the next 3 to 6 months. So, always look for that thing where the initial rush of enthusiasm's over and we've worked out what it is. If you think about innovation, it's not always the first person who innovates who gets it right. It's often the second and third people. And I think influencer marketing is in that. Now is the time to be the second or third person who does it, if I can put it like that.
Yeah, of course you can do it. The point is here that, do you see any deadline for such a trend to die? I mean that nowadays I see people have lost their trust to influencers, because they're not going to believe them, because they think that the photos are Photoshop photos. They are paid to promote a destination rather than being qualified destination or not. Not only about a destination, but also about hotel or some other issues like that. Do you think that aren't influencers just so last year's trend?
Lots of people think that. We actually had a debate in the marketing press here about that. But actually, when you read the pro side saying it's dead and the side saying it's dead and the side said, what they in the end said was actually basically what I just said, Mohammed, which is, no, I don't think I'm not saying it will never die, but I think it's not dead yet, because now we're asking the right questions about it. Now we know to have a look at what influencers have previously done. The second thing is, do not mess with your audience. If it's a sponsored post, say it's a sponsored post. There's now an emerging amount of evidence that actually being honest about that doesn't harm you, because at the end of the day, good content is good content. It's like, are you familiar with the concept of native content in print media, for example, where people pay to put articles in? Again, that's actually a very effective. People are going, oh, but you won't trust it because it's paid content. If it contains information that is helpful, it will be trusted. And you will be trusted if you deliver that. So the same with that. If your influencer is showing, obviously a positive version, but something that's authentic or something that helps people with that and they like it, it's going to work. It's not going to be passed. But it is important to understand that and to think about who the fit of that influencer is. So don't just pick somebody because they're an influencer. Pick them because they're aligned with who you are and what your brand is. So, it's no point if you're a small ecotourism experience, it's no point having someone who's on a high octane business jet lifestyle, because that's just actually going to annoy your customers just because they've got 500,000 followers. it's also worth looking at whether it's, don't just count numbers, count the depth of engagement. Look at work that they've done in the past and see what's worked. Ask them about what hasn't worked and what they learned from that. Because not everything's going to work. We have to lose a bit of our fear of failure, I think.
But the point is here that, I know some months ago, some years ago, influencers were influencers. Nowadays, influencers are companies. It means that some years ago, when influencers promoted a destination, they were paid to promote, or they promote that destination indirectly in order to promote themselves beside of that destination. But nowadays, influencers themselves have become a company. It means that they go to the destination, they start promoting it, and now they build their own community, and after that they build their own tours.
This is where working with them and looking at who are the influencers there. I don't necessarily think that having influencers, when you say a company, if an influencer is, so we have a company here called Tribe who actually brings together influencers and runs them professionally. And I think, to me, that's a good sign, because that means that you can plan for it in exactly the same way as you plan for your paid advertising, for your social media, for your PR, that you can plan and structure properly put together campaigns that will deliver for you. So I think the go off and found travel companies, that's again something you can get the lawyers involved in for a short while. But if you're looking at that and seeing what they're doing, well, what is it that you can do differently? I mean, I think we get very worried about those things, and yes, they can hurt us, but at the end of the day, if you're talking about your destination and your authenticity, then some of that's going to stay with you, and it then becomes about how you communicate and how you move on beyond that. So in the short term, I know it can be absolutely devastating, but sort it out contractually. Work with influencers who are good at working with people, not just because they're glamorous or because they're famous. Some of people may remember about 9 or 10 years ago, Australia paid to Oprah Winfrey to bring the Oprah Winfrey Show to Australia. And, you know, a lot of us were quite skeptical about that. Believe me, there is no greater influencer on the planet than Oprah Winfrey. You know, she can sell anything. But I was privileged enough to go to one of the shows that she did when she was here. And she was absolutely a committed professional. The team at Tourism Australia who worked with her, you know, she was, I cannot betray my audience because my influence comes from my audience. But what is it that you've got that I can bring together? And I think that's how you see what a really great influencer is. Oprah Winfrey probably does have a travel company now, but in the meantime, how many people did she bring to Australia to do that? So, you know, what have you got from that is what you got more than you've then lost. And how do you evolve your business to react is what I would say to that.
I just want to offer you, just watch on LinkedIn e-learning the interview that the CEO of LinkedIn had with Oprah Winfrey 2 weeks ago. It was an interview. It took around 45 minutes. When I watched that, I was totally surprised for 5 to 6 hours, and I couldn't do anything rather than sleeping in my bed to think about her sentences. You know, she's superb. She's superb. Okay, on the basis of your responses and this super influencer that you've introduced to me, you know, Oprah Winfrey.
Most of us can't afford her, I have to say.
Yeah, you know, because I do not know if our audiences watch that or not, the interview between Oprah Winfrey and His Excellency, the former president of the United States of America, Barack Hussein Obama. I just want to tell you that watch that. Just watch it. Just watch it and see what they share on the screen. Okay, anyway, because, you know, Oprah Winfrey, maybe next time I will ask Oprah Winfrey to come in Tourism Live Talk.
I'm sure she would love to. I'm not sure that. You know what? One of the things we always say in my travelresearch.com is you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah, that's right.
But my personal memory of seeing, so they recorded a live show and they did lots of things, but there was a point where her sound wasn't working. So the sound was working for the TV recording, but the audience couldn't hear. And it was funny because all the sound technicians were like, no, it's fine, just keep going, we've got it. And she said, no, the live audience has to have something too.
Great.
And she absolutely got that. And she, you know, she brought, well, I say she brought the house down, it nearly did, because we were all sat on the steps of the Sydney Opera House. But she just, I mean, I wasn't a huge opera fan before that, but to see her in action and see how professional she was, that's what you want in your influencer. You want that professional recognition that there is an exchange going on.
I see what you mean. I just want to say to our audiences, and this is the last question I was supposed to ask from Carolyn, and after that I'm just going to dedicate the time to all your questions, which are the fruitful ones, and I'm sure that we will be happy to receive them. And also this question is very important to tour operators and travel agents, because I know how much problem they have faced in the previous years to collaborate with influencers. So maybe this question and Carolyn response would come in hand for you in order to see what you can do in future with influencers. Carolyn, how do I integrate influencers into my plan? My plan, it means operators plan, to travel agents plans. How do I integrate influencers into tour operators, travel agents plan? Any pitfalls to avoid?
I think don't start with thinking about the influencers, start thinking about what you're trying to achieve and then look at where they fit in. So it comes back to, there was a very famous quote when former President Bill Clinton was campaigning to be elected as President of the United States. And they had this phrase going, what do we need to focus on in the campaign? It's the economy, because the economy was in difficulties, and that's what they made that conversation, and they had that laser-like focus on that, and every single way and channel they did, that's what they focused on. I would say the same, which is fix the strategy and then work out which of the vehicles to do. So if influencers are a good part of that, what influencers I think are doing is they are providing the intermediary of trust to people who don't know you so well, who are in their audience. So I think it's, do you need that as part of your strategy? And how does that integrate? And is that the best thing? And I would be very transparent and open with influencers that that is what you are doing, that you are integrating them into this broader campaign and that they see that role. And if they don't have an issue with that, they're not the influencer for you. So I think it's, don't worry about how you integrate them in, get the strategy right, work out if they have a role, then go through that kind of checklist that I talked about of ideas of how to get to them. And then you will find that that integration comes in, because the thinking and the strategy will shape all of those bits for you.
Yeah, great. But one of the problems is that most of the times when we talk with influencers, we cannot come to a fruitful communication. In that mean, we cannot take the advantages that we want out of the support that we're providing for influencers. We want them to promote our company, but they're promoting the destination. We want them to promote the destination out of the window of our companies, but maybe they do not know how to do it. Do you have any solutions and ideas about?
Well, I think if an influencer doesn't know how to do it, then again, they're not the influencer for you. But I think one of the challenges, and I do agree with you, yes, thinking about the question as you've now phrased it, Mohammed, it's very much easier for a destination because you just showcase the destination. But I saw an absolutely fabulous campaign here in Australia where we had a reality TV. I think it's about the situations that you create where it doesn't work if an influencer stands up and says, you know, Persian carpet travel company is fantastic. What you need to do is to create and script narratives that enable the influencer to showcase that and for that implication to be there, and make sure that you've deployed. You remember I talked about those brand assets like your logos and your situations? Just make sure they're in there in ways that feel natural. So it can't be that they're walking around with a big sign saying Persian Carpet Travel Company, but that you show them and create situations where that happens from the situation naturally. So the case study that we saw was, we have a television series that runs here in Australia, it runs in New Zealand, I think UK and US, called The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. And what The Bachelorette is, it's one girl and she has a whole bunch of suitors. And she has to pick which one she might want to marry. Yeah, I know it's horrendously tacky, but we had a character who was on there. It's normally somebody who is already quite an influencer, semi-famous, but not necessarily very famous. But they had, again, a former TV presenter who was on this looking to see if she could find a husband. And she was beset with suitors, and the way the plot of the series went, she was beset. So a travel company who promotes resorts in Thailand stepped in and gave her a bachelorette thinking weekend. And they sent her up to Thailand, and they showed her having a massage, having a spa in the hotel. They showed her sitting by the pool. They showed her meeting and chatting to people and seeking their advice. So they showed how their experience solved her problem. So what you need when you're trying to do that with influencers as travel companies, you need to be looking at the narrative that they are using, which showcases that by context, and make sure that you have properly deployed your brand assets. So not, as I say, it shouldn't have the name of the hotel company just deliberately placed all over the place in a way that doesn't feel natural. But you choose the camera angles that you see the massage being done at, for example, so that you can see the logo. You know, if you've got, you know, things like it's now quite common for hotels to have a pillow menu. Get her to be talking about, get her to be choosing a pillow from the pillow menu. So it's about how you craft the story around those things in a way that feels natural, but shows and tells that story for you. And it's perfectly okay in some of those contexts to then have the kind of activation at the end. You know, you've seen this, would you like that? It's perfectly okay to do that with influencer campaigns, is to create, in effect, create advertorial.
Yeah, thank you. Let me ask, at the beginning of Q&A, I'm just going to ask our audiences not to send questions in Persian, because in that case, I'm not allowed to share it. But they're just going to ask that influencers work in different social medias.
Yes.
Which one do you think suits an influencer to be invited to Iran? For example, an influencer is very active on Facebook, another one very active on Instagram. Some of them are active on Facebook and Instagram, another one on LinkedIn. They're just going to ask that one of those influencers would be more effective in order to be our company influencers in Iran, in order to promote Iran as a destination in the window of our company.
Okay, well, the first question about that is, where are your customers? And where in the customer journey are you trying to change behavior? I think influencers tend to work earlier in the inspiration phase, and in that trying to trigger the planning of the trip. So where do your customers go to get inspiration? And that's where you need to be. So instead of thinking about it, what channels does the influencer use? Where are your customers going? And then which influencers work in that? I mean, within that, we do know Instagram, we're on Instagram now, we know, because it's a very visual medium, that it does powerfully transact. And now with Instagram stories, we're actually able to get a little bit more of that long form content. So, you know, I'd be looking at, is that somewhere that your audiences are going? Now, my guess would be that actually, I think in some ways internationally, Facebook might be a better channel for your audiences, because that does still skew slightly older. And I think one of the things that we've seen is a big change in who is a traveler over 55. And these are the people who are really, really driving travel to countries like Iran. The other group I would say would be something is who, I think both Instagram and Facebook, an audience that I know has been very successful for Iran. Intrepid Travel runs women-only tours led by female tour guides to Iran. That sounds like an awesome experience. So I would actually, if you were looking to promote an experience like that, I would be saying, okay, where do female solo travelers get their information? Get those, where do they look and who do they trust? And get those. So there's actually a couple of travel companies and a couple of influencers who specifically work in that space. And I actually think that that would be an incredible audience for Iran. I know Intrepid's, the tours that they brought just before COVID-19, they sold out like that, because there is a hunger for that. But, you know, for many, particularly for women from outside the world of Islam, there's a concern about how they connect culturally, and this bridged that. So I would have I would have an influencer who fits that profile come off and demonstrate how to do a solo trip to Iran with that tour operator, if it was, or if it's a local tour operator. Again, that would be a fabulous niche for a, you know, a female tour operator business in Iran to take, and then get them in, work with them. So definitely, I think that's that mediation of culture. And also, I think, particularly speaking as somebody who's a cultural tourist and a woman myself, often that female side of culture is not very visible from the outside. So I think this would be a fabulous opportunity to take that in, and we all love to see behind the scenes and to really feel that deep connection. So I think that would be how I would do it, would be to look at, start with who your audience is, look at where they're transacting, look at the influencers that connect with them, and then use those forms. But within that, I would say visually, if focus, you know, Instagram. If you're skewing older, I would still think Facebook stories have a great place to be. And also YouTube. You know, the number of people who are consuming news through YouTube globally across all age groups, and even more now thanks to COVID-19, YouTube is an absolutely phenomenal place to sell content stories. So think about YouTube influencers, because it enables us to do what we're doing now, Mohammed, which is to build that relationship, build that understanding, and let the story of what we're trying to do and trying to achieve come out from that.
Great, great, great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Carolyn, for all the responses that you've made. To be honest, I cannot read it, but I just share it, Jed. Yeah. There is a brilliant young woman from India who has set up a travel company solely for women traveler. Maybe if there are any more descriptions that I can find it. But I think Jed just came up with a kind of, you know, a kind of healing solution that he's supposed to introduce us what to say. Because I was supposed to say to having your last sentence, Caroline, but at the same time I saw that Jed sent his comment to us, so I didn't want to miss it. If there are any more descriptions, Jed, we are willing. If not, it's going to be 1 hour and 40 minutes. Wow, that we have Carolyn here. This is our great honor, Carolyn. We all appreciate all the audiences who joined us.
Okay, well, I probably would want to add to that. There's another one that I would also look at, which is, you know, many Western markets are multicultural. And one of the trends I've been talking to people a lot about around the world is the growing trend for what halal travel. And, you know, young British, French, Australian, American Muslims There is a British Muslim woman who writes a halal travel guide for women travelers. Um, that would be an absolutely awesome audience because there's a sense of connection and of pride. So I would say that would be, she'd be a fabulous influencer. I wasn't thinking about it, so I haven't brought her name. But I think if you Google the halal travel guide, her name will come up. And she's talked about this idea of you know, she talks about modest travel. But it's also about cultural connection and food. And she, for example, she said, you know, lots of places around the world think it's fine, you know, if you're catering to an audience from a Muslim background, it's fine just to have halal food. She said, no, that no longer cuts it. We want to have world-class halal food. So here in Australia, we want to see your great food and wine produce. We may not be able to have wine, but we might like to have, you know, your fabulous you know, drinks made from grapes that are non-alcoholic. Maggie Beer, who is a great food influencer here, produces a fabulous non-alcoholic sparkling drink that would be perfect for that audience and is totally halal. So really, again, it's about thinking about those little niche opportunities. Have we run out of questions, you think, Mohammed?
Yeah, because I'm not going to take your time more than that. And I really appreciate you because that was a very hot topic that we talk about. It's you know, I really enjoyed it. I really appreciate all your responses, you know, in detail. And I assured you even before the live that we will go into detail through all the questions that we have here because I know your expert, your experience, and your knowledge is hugely great, and no doubt about it. And I didn't want to miss even one single moment of the time to have your responses. We listen to you for your last questions or queries or whatever you like to say. Just share your ideas with us and tell me, how was your idea about Tourism Live Talk?
I had a fabulous experience, Mohammed. I think you're doing a great thing. I'm sure it will be lots of success. And I do wish you and all your listeners, we're all in this together. So I think one of the things I would say is this is one of the hardest times. None of us know if we will have a business in 6 months' time. But I think I'm having some of the best strategic conversations of my life at the moment, really feeling that you're engaging with people at a much deeper level. And I think this is a great example of that. So I had a great time. Thank you so much for asking. Thank you so much. And I'm looking at when I can manage that trip to Iran. I do need to put in my trip to Venice and my trip to the I lost you. I don't know how to solve it, Mohammed. I actually can't see you, but